Hey guys, welcome to another huge episode of Triggered. Sorry for the neck tattoo. Little joke going wrong, and I wasn't able to really get it off there. I figured I'm going to see my kids later on, so it'll be kind of funny to leave it on there. Did a little joint bachelorette party with some friends, and they got patina neck tattoos for me. So, here we are. But what an absolutely devastating and infuriating week. Devastating for a tiny community in Canada. They just lost children in one of the worst school massacres in the history of the country. In yet another act of trans violence, of course. And infuriating because the fake news and the woke lunatics are doing exactly what they always do. They're lying to you about what happened and why. So we're going to go and do a deep dive into all of that because honestly, I'm so damn sick of the lies, the manipulation, the misdirection, and just the elimination of the actual facts, because facts matter. But it's not all bad news today, guys. We'll get into some of the biggest news from the latest job numbers, the federal workforce going to its lowest level since 1966, okay? So federal jobs, big government jobs that don't do a lot, numbers down. Regular jobs that actually generate stuff for the economy, way up. Good times. Also, violent crime plummeting across America's biggest cities. So we've got a lot to get into. So make sure you guys are liking, sharing, subscribing so you never miss one of these major episodes. Remember, if you do miss the show here on Rumble, go over to Apple, Spotify. If your friends get their podcast that way, check it out. For all of the top headlines that we cover on the show, go over my news app, MXM News, where you can get the mainstream news without the mainstream bias. And of course, don't forget about our brave sponsors for having the guts to support this program.
And guys, I want to tell you about a new way to combat censorship online, and that's with Rumble Wallet. Look, Rumble has never wavered in its support of free speech, okay? Consistently and by far the best platform out there since they started. I think I was the second verified user on the platform, so I know. It's why I don't also do this on YouTube and other places. They actually believe in it. And now they have introduced something that will give us protection from the big banks shutting us off. So that's why they launched Rumble Wallet, a wallet that no one can cancel and a wallet that supports and supporters can use to instantly tip creators without any middlemen taking any cuts. With Rumble Wallet, you control your money, not a bank, not a government, not a tech company, not even Rumble can touch it. It's yours, and it's only yours. You can even buy and save digital assets all in one place. So download Rumble Wallet today, open an account, and step away from the big banks for good. Just go to wallet.rumble.com or search Rumble Wallet in the App Store. Again, that's wallet.rumble.com. Search the Rumble Wallet in the App Store. Check it out. You're not going to want to miss that one.
First, check out all the latest predictions on Polymarket. So if you follow politics, you know everyone's got an opinion. But on Polymarket, you actually get real odds on what's likely to happen. Polymarket is a prediction market where people trade on real events, elections, debates, policy moves, and it doesn't stop at politics. There are markets on the economies, tech, sports, pop culture, and so much more. It's all live, it's transparent, and it gives you a real-time indicator of what people really think is going to happen. So go give it a look at polymarket.com, check it out, and let me know what you think. And now, let's get into all of the top headlines. And sadly, we begin in Canada with another trans mass shooting, another devastated community. And once again, the so-called elites in the media and public officials and the like are just so terrified of offending anyone that they don't dare ask the most obvious question staring all of us in the face. Why are so many of the most horrifying attacks carried out by people who identify as trans? Earlier this week, a horrific massacre took place in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, a tiny mountain community of about 2,400 people. Police identified the shooter as 18-year-old Jesse Van Rootselaar, a biological male who began transitioning 6 years ago, so at around age 12. Yep, at age 12. He killed his own mother, he killed his 11-year-old stepbrother, And then he walked into Tumbler Ridge Secondary School, a school that he had dropped out of 2 years earlier, and murdered 5 students and a teacher. The victims were children between the ages of 11 and 17. Dozens more injured. And then the coward took his own life. That's right. Another deadly attack by someone identifying as trans. And what do we see in response, especially in Canada? They go to extraordinary lengths to avoid any suggestion of a linkage. Many news outlets won't even admit the killer was male, referring to him only as a woman. We even heard the word gun person at the press conference. Watch this.
That includes the deceased gun person.
Okay. And then separately, do you know the gun person's relationship to the...
And media outlets like Reuters used female pronouns throughout one of their stories. The Associated Press, same thing. They're calling a biological male mass murderer she and her. And there's headline after headline like that. We're showing them all right there on your screen so you can see what we're up against. But it gets even better. And by better, I mean much, much worse. Take a look at this.
We're not hiding it. In fact, you're the first media to ask the question. I will say this. We identified the suspect as they chose to be identified in public and in social media. I can say that Jesse was born as a biological male who approximately, the information that I have, approximately 6 years ago began to transition to female and identified as female both socially and...
Think about what you just watched. The Canadian police, in the middle of a press conference about a mass shooting that killed 8 people, including children, are explaining that they're respecting the preferred pronouns of the mass murderer. I mean, we got to give this guy some respect, right? We're going to respect his pronouns. The guy who just slaughtered kids at a school, that's their priority, not the victims, not the families, not the warning signs that were missed, the pronouns. And as one commentator noted, if the victims were trans instead of the shooter being trans, just imagine how the regime media would be talking about it nonstop. But when it's yet another, again and again, trans shooter, the coverage is entirely different.
It helps nobody to hide behind obfuscations and in clarity. It's right that people know the truth about this, and not to hide.
And it does matter. I mean, people will be very specific about, someone arriving at a school at 10:24 or be very specific about these things. Well, we need to be specific about who commits the crime. And we've had this issue. I mean, Scotland has gone completely mad on it, but mainstream media in this country and in America and in Canada has really, really gone woke crazy on this stuff. Will routinely, newspapers here and online here will routinely report things which are factually untrue. They will report that a boy has died or a girl has died when actually it is the opposite sex because they don't want to misgender. I mean, and not correct it. And some of the time I'm actually going, I actually don't know who this person is, and yet this is one of the most key facts. We know people's names and we know their sex. That's kind of like the key, and their age. Those are kind of the key facts about people because they are the most relevant facts. But in particular, in the case of violent crime, largely women don't commit violent crime. I mean, some small, few instances, but the vast majority of women who are behind bars in this country and in every country are for non-violent offences. So when there is a very, very horrific violent crime involving multiple victims, instantly every journalist at the BBC, ITV, Sky and everywhere else should be going, this probably isn't a woman. We'll be careful about this. But they didn't do that. They stuck to it. They didn't do any investigation. But we know if it was a victim who was trans, because we understand this is a 15-year-old boy who identifies as a girl, gun crazy. If it had been a trans victim, they'd have talked non-stop about that, as they did about the tragedy of the killing of Brianna Ghey, who was a boy who was living as if he was a girl and was treated as a girl by his parents, and he was killed. He was not targeted for being gay, but most of the media reports go on and on and on about this trans killing because he was trans identified, but they ignore it when it's the perpetrator.
This is the world the radical left has built. This is what happens when ideology takes priority over everything, over truth, over safety, over basic common sense. over the grieving families of murdered children. And I want you to think about what this means on a deeper level. Families are burying their children today in a small Canadian town. And some in the media and law enforcement's top priority is making sure that nobody misgenders the killer. This is cowardice, and it's cowardice we ignore at everyone's peril. And here's a flashback to when Canadian PM Mark Carney's office put a trans flag on display outside their office building. What exactly do they think that represents at this point? I'd ask Democrats probably the same thing.
Looks like we might be getting a flag change here at the Prime Minister's office on Parliament Hill. Let's see. Canadian flag coming down. Take two guesses. What's going to replace it?
Wow, look at this. Take the Canadian flag down.
The office of the Prime Minister here, Parliament Hill, and some unhappy people around here as the pride flag goes back up on the Prime Minister's office. So, office of the Prime Minister here. Few upset people here.
So everybody
There you
wakes
have
up the
it.
next day, right? Sees this, eh? Yeah. I'm just doing my job.
So there you have it. The flag, Canadian flag on the Prime Minister's office has once again been changed for the Trans Pride Progress flag. We already had this flag flying for over a month, the entire month of June. It is back up. We are going to be at a point where like 10% of the time we have this flag instead of Canadian flag. How long before that's all we're flying up here? And as in the background, a massive, massive Palestinian protest makes its way back towards the hill. Welcome to Ottawa.
Because here's the thing. This is not an isolated incident. It's not even close. Nashville, a transgender identified shooter walks into a Christian school and murders 6 people, including 3 9-year-old children. Minneapolis, Robin Westman, another attacker with documented gender identical turmoil, targets a Catholic church and kills 2 children. The man on trial for murdering Charlie had radical transgender beliefs, and now Tumbler Ridge. That is a pattern. This is reality. The data shows it, and we have the numbers right here on your screen. But the media insist that the violence committed by mentally ill people and their transgender identity is mere coincidence. Critics are bullied into silence. They're warned not to stigmatize. The public is lied to in an attempt to force us to avert our eyes. And that's the key point here. When journalists knowingly discard biological reality, when they gloss over the obvious link to mental health, they don't just mislead you, they actively interfere with our ability to understand reality and assess danger. Think about that. They are making you less safe in order to protect an ideology. Okay? An ideology that to me seems like per capita may be the most violent ideology in existence today, including ISIS. For years, the public has been told that identifying as the opposite sex is simply another harmless expression of self-identity. Questioning it? That's dangerous. That's cruel. That's bigotry. It's borderline violence. I'm sure some of them did call it violence. Exploring whether transgender identity might signal deeper psychological distress, well, that's forbidden. Professionals who dare to raise concerns, threatened with the loss of their licenses, their reputations, their livelihoods, that dogma has consequences, and another community just suffered. Let's just be honest here. And I know this is the part where the left completely loses their minds. But believing you are the opposite of your biological sex is not a normal or neutral position. It is often a sign of severe psychological distress, depression, disassociation, self-harm, extreme social isolation. And when doctors recklessly prescribe a whole cocktail of drugs, hormones, and whatever else they throw at these kids, the consequences are devastating. Of course they are. What did you think was going to happen jacking up people to try to literally get them to change their sex with chemicals and hormones? What do you think that's going to do to people? But it does mean that when young people are spiraling, When a 12-year-old child is clearly in distress, we should not be ignoring the warning signs, and we sure as heck should not be affirming their delusions. But that's exactly what the mental health establishment tells us to do. Affirm, celebrate, never question, and then pump vulnerable teenagers full of hormones and psychotropic drugs that could be making the distress even worse. It's why the Trump administration has made it a top priority to hold these doctors and hospitals accountable for their medical malpractice. It's why we're restoring biological truth to the federal government, investigating children's hospitals and doctors who perform these sick medical experiments. I know thousands more suits were filed, I think, just this week. Finally, a victim actually got something from one of these sickos. It's why detransitioners, again, are filing these lawsuits to recover from damages, from the harm and oftentimes irreparable damage done to them. And here's the part that really should terrify every parent in America and Canada and really anywhere in the world. The same establishment that demands we affirm all of this, the same media, the same activists, they are constantly telling people who identify as trans that they are under attack. They are basically programming people to lash out. And then, when they do lash out, the same people act shocked. There were really no warning signs, guys. Really? There were signs, like everywhere. They just didn't want us to take note of them. You're not allowed to call it out. That's just a little something. We got to let that one go, right? Rinse and repeat. The common denominator isn't even just identity. It's unrelated and untreated, mistreated illness, okay? And every time the media refuses to report plainly, every time officials tiptoe around the obvious facts, every time ideology is allowed to override common sense, we are inviting another tragedy. And the New York Post put out a great piece on this, actually, and credit to them for having the guts to say what other outlets are too afraid to say, that this is not compassion. Calling a male mass murderer she, while families plan funerals for their children, is not compassion. Hiding biological reality is not compassion. It's criminal. It's actively dangerous. If someone denies basic biological truths about themselves, that is evidence of distress, not a brave new identity to be endlessly affirmed. Doesn't make you beyond reproach. Silencing doctors who raise concerns doesn't improve outcomes. It makes things worse. We must speak the truth so we don't have to keep lighting candles for the victims or keep burying innocents and children. This delusion is dangerous. It's why I spoke up about the trans woman in sports issue so early on, because I saw where this was all heading. And sadly, it seems that I was all too correct. Now, thankfully, this administration has taken steps to stop our government from actually subsidizing this insanity, because schools will now lose their federal funds if they keep pushing this gender delusion inside of classrooms, on the playing field, or in the workplace, because it has got to end. It's all part of bringing common sense back. And speaking of common sense, I want to pivot a little bit to some really incredible news that the fake news is doing everything in their power to either ignore or to spin, because it's an absolute grand slam for the Trump economy. The January jobs report just came out, and it crushed expectations. The economy added 130,000 jobs, more than double what the so-called experts predicted. Unemployment dropped to 4.3%. And here's the number that really tells the story. Private sector job growth is surging while government job growth is declining. Okay? That's a big one. Not bureaucrats, people actually doing real things. Those are the people who are getting jobs. When my father took office last year, the economy Biden left him was losing private sector jobs, just hemorrhaging them, and adding government payroll jobs day in and day out. The government was getting bigger. The private sector was shrinking. That was the Biden economy. Fewer real jobs, more bureaucrats. And Team Trump flipped the script completely. 1 year later, it's all private sector growth while actually cutting government jobs. Check this out.
Yesterday's blockbuster, expectation-smashing jobs report reinforces what we've been saying all along. President Trump's economic agenda has a proven track record. It unleashed historic job, wage, and economic growth during his first term, and we're seeing that same story unfold now during his second term. Yesterday's job report showed a stunning 170,000 private sector jobs being added. We saw unemployment tick down, labor force participation tick up, real wages continue to increase. And all of this is happening in spite of the fact that we inherited an absolute disaster from Joe Biden. Yesterday's job report showed revisions that 2 million fewer jobs were created during the last 2 years of the Biden presidency than we previously thought. And the jobs he did create were largely going to illegal aliens, foreigners, or to make work government jobs. President Trump is focused on real, sustainable, private sector-led economic growth. And this is just the beginning. The president's policies are just now beginning to take effect.
615,000 private sector jobs added in Trump's second term so far. Construction up 33,000 in January alone, because those trillions of dollars in manufacturing investments that Trump secured are actually turning into real buildings and real factories and real jobs. Average weekly earnings for private sector workers, they're up 4.3%. Prime age labor force participation at its highest level since 2001. More Americans are coming off the sidelines and getting back to work. And over the last year, native-born employment, okay, people actually born here, rose nearly 900,000, while the number of foreign-born workers and the employment there fell by 100,000. Remember, border security also means economic security. And putting Americans first means making sure companies aren't using biased and unfair programs to lower wages and push out American workers. And by the way, remember all the hysteria that tariffs were going to do to the economy? They were going to destroy the economy. Where are those pundits now? Remember all that panic? All that insanity? Guys, we're sticking to the mission. Promises made, promises kept. Some of this stuff takes a little time to matriculate and get out there, especially with all the people working against us, but it's happening. And speaking of cutting the bloat and cutting the waste, federal employment now is the lowest it's been since 1966. That's a big deal. Check this out.
I think that the top line is that there was a lot more private sector job creation. Once again, it was 172,000. And one of the stories that everybody's been worried about, I mean, it's actually a legitimate thing to worry about, is that AI was going to take away people's jobs. Well, the top line job number shows that that's not happening. But the other thing you can see is that prime age labor force participation, which is like people's desire to go get a job and to get back into the workforce, went up to the highest level it's been since 2001. And so I think that the AI story needs to be modified a little bit. What's happening is that AI is increasing productivity and wages and bringing people back into the labor force. And finally, the interesting thing, too, is this all happened while federal government employment went down a lot, about 360,000 over this year, which means that federal government employment is the lowest it's been since 1966 and the lowest as a share of the overall labor force that it's been ever in all recorded history, which goes back to the Second World War.
I'll say it again. Under this administration, federal employment has declined to its lowest levels since 1966. And not just the lowest in raw numbers, but the lowest level in recorded history as a share of the total workforce, okay? That's a big deal, right? It's not like, oh, it's just a low number, but yeah, it's high because with population's grown and whatever it is. No, it's just down across the board. This is what they told us was impossible. Remember that? We need all these federal workers. No, you don't. You can't cut the federal government. The bureaucracy is too entrenched. Doge will never work. Elon Musk is going to break everything. Well, guess what? They cut it. They streamlined it. And the economy didn't collapse. It's booming. Fewer people on the taxpayer payroll. More people in real, productive private sector jobs. That is exactly how this is supposed to work. The radical left wants you to believe that government bloat is economic growth. It's not. It never was, and it never will be. Government jobs don't grow the pie. They take away from it. When you shift from a government-dependent economy to a private sector-driven economy, everybody wins. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And while we're on the topic of winning, new crime data shows that violent crime, including murders, are at historic lows. Another big deal, another big win.
Well, look, I won't get ahead of the president, Laura, and he may be speaking with the press later today, but he did take down the post. And again, this is merely a distraction for the fake news media from Trump or X last night, from the fact that this week it was revealed 0 illegal aliens were released into our country again for 9 months in a row, another historic achievement of this administration. The fact that this week we saw the data murder rates in this country the lowest since 1900. I mean, these are unbelievable results on behalf of all Americans, regardless of race, religion, or creed, whether they live in a red state or a blue state. And we fight extremely hard here every single day to get the fake news media to pay attention to the wins and the achievements that I see this president firsthand working around the clock to accomplish and to deliver on behalf of this great country, which he loves so much.
Violent crime is plummeting across America's biggest cities. And I'm not talking about a small dip. I'm talking about a steep, dramatic drop. And under the FBI's Operation Summer Heat, homicides are down roughly 20% across 52 major cities. 20% across 52 major cities in a year. Seattle down 42%. Denver down 41%. Baltimore, Memphis, major drops everywhere. Compared to a year ago, we have the lowest murder rate in modern history. A 200% increase in arrests, and over 6,000 innocent kids rescued. 31% more deadly fentanyl off the streets, and 6 out of the 10 most wanted fugitives captured in just the last year. Now, how does the fake news give the Trump administration any credit? Of course they don't, guys. They spent 4 years telling you crime was a myth, that it was all right-wing fear-mongering. And now that the numbers are out, it's undeniable. You know what's driving this? Law enforcement being empowered to do their jobs. Criminals knowing there's a president in the White House who backs safety and security instead of backing the mob. And by the way, we're seeing the same thing on Capitol Hill with the SAVE Act, which would require proof of citizenship to vote and require voters to actually show ID. First off, why isn't this already the law? I mean, the real question, that's really the real question here, right? Is it because Democrats don't want it? They don't want integrity in our election process? I mean, there's third world banana republics that you need voter ID for around the world. Almost every country requires it. Now, the left claims it's an assault on voting rights, but they can't actually explain why. Just look at this exchange between Scott Jennings and a liberal pundit on CNN, because it's priceless.
He is actually championing a bill that actually would take voting rights away from a lot of black people in this country.
Wait, what voting rights is he taking away from black voters?
Oh, if we look at
the SAVE Act?
The SAVE Act, that's exactly what we're talking about. That is actually going to continue to disenfranchise overwhelmingly a lot of people of color. There are so many civil rights organizations that have run the data. If we look at the way that it is going to disenfranchise black voters, it's the same reason why Chuck Schumer called it Jim Crow 2.0.
So
this is the same president. If we want to continue...
You haven't said how yet.
I am talking about it. It's the way that you're putting new poll taxes on this when you're making people have... That's what we can call them now. It's kind of an idiom, right? If you want to say that people have to prove that they are citizens, that they have to prove with a voter ID, the reality is you're layering what is a constitutional right for the American people and making it harder for people to vote in this country, and it's going to disenfranchise black voters.
Concern you that you're making all these claims? You've yet to lay out how it's hurting anyone, but 76% of black voters think we should show an ID to vote. 80% of Hispanic voters, 83% of the American people. Are you saying that black voters are too dumb to know what's good for them? I mean, it sounds pretty condescending to me. You get 3/4 of black voters who want voter ID.
Just to be clear, the SAVE Act is not just about IDs. The SAVE Act is about proof of citizenship. So what? It doesn't.
It also makes it very hard for married women who've changed
I was just going to say, we talked about this before.
By the way,
it's not. It actually, there's an argument to be made that red state voters, women, poor white voters could be just as.
I know you think they're dumb too, don't you?
Young
I mean,
voters?
that's the thing.
Nobody
I hear
they're
these
dumb.
arguments. I've
Scott,
heard
hold on,
Democrats all
hold on,
week long.
Scott.
No,
Please don't. No, you listen.
There's the deflection from talking about Donald Trump's racism.
I'm actually
right there.
You should be thinking about your constituents or your.
Yeah, I think they're smart enough to figure out how to register to vote. Abby.
Hold on. Most Americans don't have a passport. Many Americans don't have access to their birth certificate. Many women, a majority of women who change their names for marriage have to provide additional proof that they've changed their legal names in order to register to vote.
I have heard Democrats make these same arguments.
Why don't you actually respond to the substance of what I'm saying?
I am, and
as
the substance
opposed
is
to
this.
making this about something that it's not.
You're saying,
it's not just about voter ID.
married
It's
women,
also about
black
who has
voters,
access
and rural people
to-
are too stupid to figure out how to register to vote.
No, that's not.
that is not what
Democrats
she
are
said.
making
That
this
is
argument all the
so
time. It's
offensive.
crazy.
That
That
is
is so
not what she
offensive.
said.
Let
Are
me
you
offer
saying
the
they can't
proof.
figure out how
Let
to
me
vote?
offer the
Are you
proof.
saying they can't
This
figure
is
out how to
the
vote?
exact same argument.
It is a fact that a majority of Americans do not have passports. Many Americans, including white people, do not have their original birth certificate or access to it.
You didn't say what you said. Rural
I
white
would
people.
love to offer the proof on this.
Yeah, because that is also relevant. It doesn't matter to me where people live.
I guess I have a little more faith in
Do they have
rural
access?
America and married women than you do.
Look, I don't know
You're saying
why.
they can't
I
figure
don't
out
know
how to
why
vote?
you think
What
why
is
you're
going
making
on
this
here?
about whether you're smart or not.
You're saying that they can't vote, that they can't figure out how to document to register to vote?
Access to documentation of proof of where you were born or proof of citizenship is an additional thing that people
Because
will
at
have
one
to
point,
do.
black people actually
She
weren't even
describes it as a
allowed.
barrier to vote.
It's a barrier.
It is a barrier.
And by the way, for anyone claiming voter fraud isn't real, out in California, a dog, yes, really, successfully voted in a recent election. Its owner was only caught after posting a photo of the animal wearing an I voted sticker, and one report says the dog owner actually self-reported in an effort to expose the system. Either way, this is not a joke.
And the principle at the heart of the SAVE Act, voter ID, is something he's spoken about a lot. And frankly, is something that I think makes a lot of sense. You look around the world, upwards of 90% of democracies require voter ID. The idea that you wouldn't have it would probably seem bizarre to most people living in democracies around the world. Most states have it as well. And this is something that falls within Congress's authority under the Elections Clause when it comes to federal elections. Similarly, I'm sponsoring a bill to reform redistricting, so we don't have gerrymandering anymore in congressional elections. That is another example of something that falls under Congress's authority with the Elections Clause.
So on the SAVE Act, there are concerns. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I know that polls suggest that most Americans, including most Democrats, support voter ID. But there are concerns from critics that it could make it harder for some legitimate groups of people to vote, U.S. citizens, people who don't have driver's licenses, anyone whose current legal name differs from their birth certificate, people who don't have the money to travel internationally so they don't have passports. Is there anything in your legislation that could help those individuals so they are able to vote?
Yeah, so I think that whatever cross-section of the American electorate you look at, any of those groups that you just mentioned, I think that polling shows they all do support voter ID. But to answer your question directly, there are provisions saying, for example, that if you're voting by mail and you're in a state that has basically cross-checked its voter rolls against the federal database, then you don't necessarily need to provide proof of citizenship directly when you cast your ballot. But I will say this is just a common sense solution, and there are documented cases where things don't go as they should. In California, recently someone was arrested because their dog voted in several elections. Then the dog died and kept getting a ballot. So these are just kind of basic weaknesses that shouldn't exist in a well-functioning democracy, that don't exist in other democracies around the world. And I think it's time to pass this, as well as, by the way, pass redistricting reform so we don't have gerrymandering. I think those two things together could form a viable bipartisan deal that would assure fair elections in this country.
Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley of California, thanks so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Now, big picture, the contrast could not be clearer. Under Democrat leadership, defund the police, open the jails, election chaos, let violent criminals walk. And under Trump, you have law and order, public safety, secure the border, secure our elections, and cripple violent crime. And look, the big picture, today's whole show is really clear on. You have one hand where you have the radical left and the fake news covering up the truth about a mass shooting to protect their gender ideology, gaslighting the public, refusing to ask hard questions. And on the other hand, you have the Trump administration creating private sector jobs, cutting government bloat to historic lows, driving violent crime down across America's biggest cities, and rooting out sick ideology from being subsidized by your taxpayer dollars. One side is making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. The other side can't even tell you the biological sex of a mass murderer because it may hurt some other lunatic's feelings. Because for whatever reason, the left wants to have debates or national conversations about issues that have been obvious since the beginning of time. That's the choice. It's always been the choice. And America made the right one in November of 2024. And we've got to keep making the right choices to keep our country headed in the right direction. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. My heart truly goes out to every family in Tumbler Ridge, every parent, every student, every first responder. That is a community that will never be the same again, and they deserve the truth, even if some are too cowardly to give it to them. So I ask you guys, remember to like, to share, to subscribe, get this message out there so people can actually see what the hell is going on. Maybe if enough people become aware, we can put an end to this nonsense. Maybe if enough people actually speak out, get this message out. It matters. Maybe it changes things. Guys, also make sure, again, like, share, subscribe. Download the Rumble app on your smart TV. Check us out on Apple or Spotify podcast if you missed the show here. Also, don't forget to check out our incredible sponsors down below and in the video description, okay? They have the guts to support this kind of programming, to be able to get that word out there. Show them some love as well. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all again very soon.